Today, we are going to analyze the 2023 NEET biology paper. We are going to analyze the chapter-wise distribution, the year-wise distribution, the type of questions which had been come. We've already discussed the solution of the NEET biology paper in the previous video. This is basically the overall analysis, the overview of the total paper. Now, if you see the textbook-wise distribution or the year-wise distribution of this paper, you would find that this time, compared to 11th NCERT and 12th NCERT, the distribution was 55-45. Out of the 100 questions which had been asked, you had 55 questions from 11th NCERT and you had 45 questions which were being asked from your 12th NCERT textbook. If you ask my opinion, it's a far more better distribution as compared to what was asked last year. What you see in brackets in front of you are the question numbers which were asked last year. That means last year, your 11th NCERT had 50 questions and 12th NCERT, they had asked 50 questions. Now, as we all know that 11th NCERT has far more chapters as compared to 12th. And that is why you find this distribution which is done this year of 55 from 11th NCERT and 45 questions from 12th NCERT is far more balanced as per my opinion. So this is what was the distribution according to your 11th and 12th, the numbers of questions. Now, the next point what we have to notice is that the type of questions which had been asked in the entire paper, as has been the norm even in the previous years, all 100 questions which had come in the bio paper were NCERT based questions. This is what was the basic norm which was followed. Now, out of these questions which had been asked, you had around 18 questions which were match the column type, which is a larger number as compared to what was asked last year. So there were 18 match the column type of questions which were asked this year. You had 11 questions which were statement 1, statement 2 based. That means there were 11 questions which they asked, in which they had asked 2 statements, and they had told you to find out which is the correct statement, whether both the statements are correct, whether both the statements are incorrect, so on and so forth. There were assertion-based questions, assertion reason-based questions, which were 8 in number. So 8 questions were assertion reason-based, which is greater than what was asked last year. If I'm not wrong, last year you had around 3 assertion-based and reason-based questions. This time they had 8 assertion reason-based questions. And I'm very sure, pretty sure, now this is something which will become the norm. The number of assertion reason questions every year are going to increase, and this would become a standard process and a standard format of the NEET bio paper. Henceforth, the assertion reason type of questions, by the way, had come for the very first time in NEET paper last year. The next type of questions which were asked were the identifying correct statements. So they used to give you multiple statements. They gave you multiple statements and they asked what are the types, or how many are correct out of these, or how many are incorrect out of these. There were 14 such questions which were asked this year. The next, which is the largest number, which has been the largest number every year, were direct questions, whereby you had direct facts which were asked, direct options which were asked. You had to select any one out of the 4. So there were 49 such questions. So this is the overall overview of the paper with respect to the type of questions asked. As you see, there were 18 questions which were match the column type. That was a very big number compared to last year. You had 8 questions which were assertion reason type, which is increased as compared to last year. You had 11 questions in which there was statement 1 and statement 2 given, and you were told to find out whether both are correct or both are incorrect, or any one of them is correct or which one is correct. You had 14 questions where you had multiple statements and you had to identify which or how many out of these were the correct statements. You had 49 straightforward direct option selection type of questions. So this is what was the distribution with regards to the type of questions which were asked. Now, if I have to find out and point out what exactly were the question-wise analysis. So there were certain lack of demarcation regarding botany, zoology, which we noticed last year also and this year also. Last year was botany, zoology, distribution. This year also the botany, zoology, distribution has been done. But what has been observed is that they are not following an exact watertight system of which chapters to be included in botany and which to be included in zoology. For example, chapters like principles of inheritance, chapters like organisms and population, biomolecules, molecular basis, cell division, biotech. These were questions whereby you had some questions which were asked in the botany section and some questions which were asked in the zoology section also. So a chapter-wise distribution, and if you talk of last year, cell was asked in botany last year. This time they have asked cell in botany as well as zoology. So we do not have yet a clear-cut demarcation of certain chapters to be included in botany or zoology. Of course, there are chapters like morphology, anatomy, which are clearly defined as botany. Whereas all your systems are clearly defined as zoology. But a lot of the chapters of genetics, chapters of ecosystem, chapters of your biomolecules and cell unit are not yet clearly demarcated, whether they are in botany or whether they are in zoology, because the type of questions keep on changing every year. Another thing what we have noticed this year was a very uneven chapter-wise distribution. This was seen last year also, but this year it has become more pronounced in the sense, chapters like molecular basis of inheritance and cell division. This was seen even last year. The number of questions which have been asked are pretty high compared to, the other chapters which should have been given equal justice to. So 9 questions had been asked from molecular basis and 6 from cell division. And mind you, cell division, this is something which you have to notice this is happening since past 2 years again. Last year also they had asked 5 questions of cell division. This time they asked 6 questions of cell division. So it's a pretty small chapter, but they've asked 6 questions. This year, 5 questions last year. And if you compare it with evolution, which is a decently sized chapter, there was only a single question which had been asked from evolution. Biological classification, a decent sized chapter, not even a single question came from that. Microbes, no question. Living world, no question which was asked. Enhancement in food production, only a single question had come from that chapter. So I would say the chapter-wise distribution is uneven. You are having a larger number of questions from molecular basis and cell division, and you have very low number of questions which are coming from the other chapters like evolution, enhancement, microbes, biological classification, etc. Cell division and molecular basis, mind you, it's a note for you that this is something which has become, last year also it was the same. So we have to notice, we have to see to it that cell division is strong because they have been asking a lot of questions from that chapter. Another thing which is after a very long time they asked this year was the date. So normally the number of questions on dates are not frequent, and for last few years they had not asked questions on date. This year a single question on dates was asked. So that is another unique thing which came this year, which was not something seen in the last year's paper. Now, if you go unit-wise distribution, in brackets are the questions which had been asked last year, and the questions this year have been also given. So if you see unit 1, I had already told you living world, biological classification, not even a single question was asked. So there were 6 questions which were asked from unit 1 as compared to 10 last year. This year they asked 6 questions from unit 1, whereby they asked 3 from plant kingdom and 3 from the animal kingdom. If you see the unit 2, which is your big unit comparatively with regards to morphology as a chapter, they had asked 10 questions, which is very similar to what they asked last year. 9 questions were asked last year, whereby it's an even distribution of 3, 3, 4, 3 from morphology, 3 from anatomy, and 4 questions which came from structural organization of animals. This year there was no question on earthworm and frog. Last year they had asked a question on earthworm. This year, as expected, was not asked. The unit 3, which is a cell unit, you see the number of questions which were pretty, a big number, 12 questions from unit 3. And you can see the distribution also very imbalanced. You have 6 questions from a small chapter like cell division, whereas you had 2 questions from cell as a unit. So last year the distribution was even. Okay, it was 4, 4, 5. This year, cell they asked 2 questions, biomolecules 4, which is same as last year. and cell division, they asked 6 compared to 5, which was asked last year. Unit 4, again, a very even distribution this year. I found 13 questions came from Unit 4 with an almost even distribution of 3 coming from transport in plants, 2 from mineral nutrition, photosynthesis 3, respiration 2, plant growth 3. So I would consider it as a very balanced distribution of questions which came from your plant physiology unit, that is your Unit 4. Unit 5, if you notice, it's a pretty big unit with regards to the number of chapters. There were 14 questions which came from this unit, 2 from digestion, a single question from breathing and exchange, which is understandable. It's a small chapter. Circulation had 2 questions. Excretion, now this was something which was a surprise, had 3 questions. Comparatively, it is a smaller chapter, but they have asked 3 questions from excretion as a chapter. Locomotion had 2 questions. Neural coordination had 2 questions. And chemical coordination had 2 questions. So balanced distribution for Unit 5, which is your human physiology unit. So 14 which had been asked this year as compared to just 10 which was last year. When we go to the 12th standard NCERT textbook units, we have Unit 6, the reproduction unit, in which again I would consider it as a balanced distribution of 9 questions as compared to 10 last year, in which reproduction in organism had 1 question, sexual reproduction in plants was 3, which has been a standard even last year. Human reproduction had 3, again similar to what was asked last year, whereas there were 2 questions which came from reproductive health. Unit 7 has always been the unit whereby large number of questions has been asked. As I already told you, the molecular basis had 9 questions, which is also seen last year. Evolution, a single question was asked compared to 2 which had come last year. So evolution as a chapter, if you notice, it's a chapter which has a lot of facts, a lot of points which are there, but every year the number of questions which come from this particular chapter are less. So this year 14 questions came from this particular unit with a distribution of 4, 9 and 1 from evolution. Your human health and disease enhancement, so the unit of human welfare, the human welfare unit, if you see, had a distribution which is not so much comparatively, just 4 questions from this unit with maximum number of questions coming from the human health and disease chapter, which is 3. Enhancement had just a single question, and microbes had no question at all. At least 1 was expected, which was not seen. Last year, if you see, the enhancement chapter had 4 questions which had been asked. This year, just a single question was asked regarding enhancement of food production. The next unit, which is your biotech unit, has always been the unit which the number of questions asked were large. Last year was a very surprising distribution of paper. They had asked 12 questions from this unit. And, it was something which was very surprising. So this year, thankfully, they have balanced it out and they have asked only 6 questions from this unit. So last year, the distribution was not even with regards to unit. They were small chapters, but 12 questions had been asked from it. So this year, they have done a comparatively better balance of this unit. Only 6 questions came from it, and 5 out of them came from the principles and processes chapters. A single question came from the applications chapter. If you compare it with last year, you can see biotech and its application. They had asked 6 questions from that particular chapter. It was not a great distribution. Thankfully, this year it has been corrected in the distribution. So last year, if you, the last unit, if you notice, is unit number 10. Again, I would consider it as a balanced distribution whereby you have 12 questions asked from these 4 chapters, with the maximum coming from organism and population, which is understandable. It's a pretty bigger chapter in this unit. And another chapter, environmental issues, they had asked 4 questions, which is again slightly higher than what was expected. But you have a distribution which is fairly even as such, with 12 coming from unit 10, as opposed to 9 which had come from unit 10 in the last year's NEET paper. So this is basically the entire unit-wise distribution which has been asked in the bio paper. If you notice your overall, I have already told you, it was a pretty straightforward as a paper. Compared to last year, the paper was easier. The type of questions are something which is whatever type of questions were expected. It was not surprising. There is one question with regards to the inbreeding part, which is ambiguous, which is not such a greatly defined question. There would be objections to those questions with regards to the options. But overall, if you see, the paper was a pretty decent paper with a very even distribution of your 11th and your 12th NCR. So that's it for today. That is regarding the entire analysis of the paper. Thank you.